Good morning. I want to talk today about 2025, the year in review. What I'm going to do is look at what I expected to happen astrologically and compare that to some of the things that actually did happen. Now, as a reminder, I view astrology as just giving a weather report. I don't really know exactly what will happen. I just know what the weather surrounding the events will be like. It's kind of like when on the local news, your weather person says that a big storm is heading this way. And he's correct about that, he or she. But what they don't know is that that severe storm will trigger 5 tornadoes that might do an awful lot of damage. Nonetheless, what happened is certainly connected with the expectation. Okay, let me share my screen, get my slideshow up here, and then we'll begin. And this will take just a minute as I have to get rid of some panels up here so that I can see what I'm doing. It's going to take me a little bit longer than usual, it looks like. But I'm almost there. Oops, and here we are, 2025, the year in review. So, these are some of the things I anticipated. I have sort of short titles here. For the world, I was anticipating a year of shortages, technology advancing rapidly, expansion of consciousness. I'll talk about that more later. Many structures dissolving, and people protesting a lot. For America, I thought we would get closer to civil war, though I'm not expecting the blue armies versus the gray army kind of battle we had in 1861, but more of a separation into blue states and red states, people protesting more, and occasional acts of violence by lone wolves. I also anticipated a greater likelihood of conflict or war abroad, and I called October a month of wounding for America. For Trump, I felt that he would substantially wound the structures of government and democracy in this country, that he would greatly work to increase executive and presidential power, that he would engage in some sort of aggressive actions at home, that he would create a lot of chaos, and that there would be many things at home and abroad that he would wound. We'll go into more detail about that later. And for Russia, I was expecting signs of instability to appear because the Saturn-Neptune conjunction began actually this summer, becomes exact in February of 2026. And Russia has a long history of major things occurring during these Saturn-Neptune conjunctions that usually bring about some shifting of power or change in course. Okay, let's get started here. First with the world. I called this a year of shortages. And this year of shortages began with the winter solstice of 2024. And in this winter solstice chart, you can see that Saturn is very prominent. It's opposite the moon. It's involved in the strong T-square. And in many of the following charts for equinoxes, solstices, and eclipses, Saturn was again very prominent. And Saturn has this restrictive influence. It's contraction rather than growth. So going into 2025, I anticipated that in many ways this might be a year of shortages. And here are some of the shortages that have occurred according to artificial intelligence. We've had semiconductor memory shortages, rare earth mineral shortages, silver supply shortages, food supply shortages in conflict zones, energy and utility costs have spiked. That's an affordability shortage. We have an affordable housing shortage, certainly in America, industrial supply chain shortages. Trump has made cuts to U.S. aid, which creates a shortage of life in many third world countries. And overall, we've had globally supply chain disruptions and price increases caused by Trump's tariffs, another affordability shortage. Okay, we have also seen very rapid advances in technology, and this is due to two things: Pluto in Aquarius, and then Uranus moving into Gemini on July 7th, where in 2025 it stayed until it retrograded back into Taurus, I believe, on November 7th. And then late April, it goes back into Gemini, where it will stay for a while. But with these two planets in these two signs and making a trine with one another, technology and invention have been on steroids. And we're now getting to the point where artificial intelligence is being embedded in everything. So, this was the weather report that technology and invention would advance rapidly. But we have seen many specifics of how that has played out this year. And we've seen advances in artificial intelligence, biotechnology, nuclear fusion, battery storage, quantum technologies, and quantum computing, and robotics. They're developing robots now that can do amazing things, that can run and dance. And among the many advances in biotechnology, I read just the other day a story about how I believe in Israel, researchers had been able to take fat cells from a person, convert them to stem cells, and then use a 3D printer to create a functional model of the person's heart that could be used for transplant. The first one they did was just a small version, but in theory, you make a larger version. You can use that to replace someone's heart, and there are no issues of rejection involved. And I think recently that an artificial kidney has also been created in the same way. I say artificial, but created from human cells. And of course, there's this company in Dallas called Colossal, which brought back the dire wolf through gene editing. And they are working on bringing back other extinct species like the woolly mammoth. And earlier this year, first step, they created woolly mice. So there's a lot of advances in technology happening very rapidly right now. Okay, expansion of consciousness. This is because of this Uranus, Neptune, Pluto minor grand trine that began to form in July of 2025 and will be present off and on over the next 4 years. And Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto open up our brains to higher order thinking, to new perspectives and new insights. And this will work out on different levels. For the masses, everyone's minds will be opening up a bit more, and this usually pushes them in a more liberal, progressive, global, or even cosmic direction. Consequently, as a result of this, I suspected that Trump's coalition, both in the country and in Congress, would start to fray and splinter a bit as people opened up their minds and looked at what was going on and say, wait a minute, this is not what I wanted. And probably the most notable break with Trump has been in Congress coming from Marjorie Taylor Greene, who went from being one of Trump's staunchest supporters to now being really dismayed by the things that he is doing. So, at the lowest level, everyone's mind just about is going to begin opening up a bit to new thoughts, new perspectives, and being a little bit more progressive, a little bit more global or cosmic. At a little bit higher level, the Pluto in Aquarius, trine Uranus and Gemini, is bringing about that revolution in technology and inventions that I just talked about. People in science and research are having more of these aha moments, and it's just happening very rapidly. At the highest level, for those who are truly spiritually inclined, this is going to be a wonderful time when it's easier to make this greater connection with the universe and the cosmos. I find it interesting that on this day, July 11th, 2025, that was also the day that the new Superman movie was released, and the themes of truth, justice, and a more cosmic perspective characterize the message of this configuration. That is kind of a foreshadowing of things to come. Okay, structures dissolving. This is because the Saturn-Neptune conjunction actually began this summer. And for almost all summer long, the two planets were within 1-degree orb of one another in Aries. The exact conjunction takes place on the 20th of February in 2026. But by and large, Saturn represents structure, Neptune dissolves structures. So during these conjunctions, which occur approximately every 36 years, we tend to see a lot of old structures dissolving and new structures and ideologies taking their place. But those new ideologies aren't necessarily good. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Under the 1917 conjunction, the new ideology the world got was communism. Under the 1989 conjunction, we saw many of the countries in the Soviet bloc break away and adopt democracy for their government. And we literally saw the Berlin Wall fall, dissolve before our very eyes. So that's the sort of thing that goes on. But we also have that Saturn representing control and structure and regulation. It will sometimes resist this tendency for things to dissolve, and that's where we get this authoritarian backlash against things. And in America, we have witnessed a rapid dismantling of democratic structures, and new far-right ideologies have been promoted by the government in the United States, Canada, United Kingdom, European Union, and Australia. We've seen a rise in anti-immigrant sentiment, and travel restrictions have been implemented in the United States, United Kingdom, and the European Union. Also, the structure of airplanes has been crumbling. We usually think of Neptune as ruling the seas because the oceans have no boundary, water has no boundary, but the same is true of air. And airplanes are the airships that sail that atmospheric ocean. And the structure of those airplanes has been crumbling all year long. It seems like every week we have news of another air catastrophe or a near miss occurring. And all of this is due to this Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And things can happen before we get to this tight and an orb. And thus, in America, as I mentioned, Trump has been dismantling so much of the structure of our government and our democratic processes. Okay, peep protesting. During much of the 10-year period from 2025 through 2035, Pluto will spend much of its time out of bounds in the southern latitude. And this is a time when people will tend to rebel. This is based on research by Roseanne Finn, who has been talking about this a lot. And the most notable protests in the fall of 2025 may have been the No Kings protest in America. According to artificial intelligence, this event was participated in by over 7 million people in the United States. And additional protests against Trump were held that day in Canada, Mexico, Panama, the United Kingdom, Ireland, France, Germany, Australia, Italy, Portugal, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, and Japan. And then additional protests this year, with many led by Generation Z, have occurred in Madagascar, Nepal, the Philippines, Indonesia, Kenya, Mexico again, Peru, Argentina, Venezuela, Morocco, and Turkey. So again, the astrological weather tells us that protests are more likely at this time, but doesn't tell us what the specific events will be. That's where the free will of people has its impact. Okay, for America, I mentioned Civil War. Here is the chart for the beginning of the 1861 Civil War. Neptune was at 29 degrees 57 minutes of Pisces. And the very next day, it went into Aries. So for several years, astrologers have warned that celestial configurations prior to the American Civil War have been repeating themselves. Astrologers began to warn about civil war before historians and other political pundits began to talk about how we're edging more and more towards civil war. And many commentators say that we're now in a soft civil war between blue and red states. And when Neptune moves into Aries, this is exacerbated because Neptune went into Aries immediately the day after the start of the American Civil War. Furthermore, on March 29th of 2025, a solar eclipse activated America's Civil War point. This is because when the Civil War broke out, Neptune was at 29 degrees 57 minutes of Pisces. And during this March 29 solar eclipse of 2025, Neptune was at 29 degrees 58 minutes of Pisces, just 1 minute of arc difference. And we have seen more unrest since that point in time. Okay, let me go back to Civil War for a second. At this point, I'm not expecting a war where we have a blue army facing directly opposite a gray army, as we did back in the 1860s, but I am expecting the country to perhaps divide even more into blue states versus red states, more lawsuits being brought against the federal government by many of those blue states, more protests to occur, and more violent actions taken by these lone wolves who try and solve their political gripes with a gun. Now, at times, we're going to have, I think have had, Jupiter come into a trine relationship with Saturn. And during those times, progressives and conservatives will tend to find it easier to work together. So there may be times when the political divide in America seems to lessen. but there are probably going to be some other times coming up when it worsens. So we just have to keep an eye on things. And all of the aggression that lies ahead for America, it actually could happen either at home or abroad. So let's take a look at war abroad in 2025. With progressed Sun square natal Mars, Uranus moving into Gemini, and Neptune moving into Aries, the likelihood of conflict at home or abroad for America increases beginning in 2025. So in 2025, on March 30th, Neptune moved into Aries, and Aries is a more aggressive, more assertive sign. And of course, as I just mentioned, Neptune going into Aries is associated with the American Civil War in this country. On July 7th, Uranus went into Gemini, where in 2025 it stays until about November 7th before retrograding back into Taurus for a few months, but then in late April, it goes back into Gemini for good for several years. And America tends to find itself involved in conflict either internally or externally whenever Uranus is in Gemini. Uranus was in Gemini during the American Civil War, during the American Revolution, then again during the American Civil War, and a few months after Uranus went into Gemini, I believe in 1941, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor and America entered World War II. And now it's going back into Gemini again, and that raises the likelihood of conflict either at home or abroad. And of course, we have seen unrest at home. We have seen Trump use the force, Border Patrol, ICE, National Guard, and even the Marines in battles against certain groups residing in this country. And we have seen aggressive actions against Iran, bombing Iran last summer. More recently this fall, bombing boats piloted by alleged drug traffickers around the coast of Venezuela. Recently, a dock in Venezuela being destroyed. And if we look at the progress chart for America, I'm looking at the July 2nd, 1776 chart for when the Declaration of Independence was passed. But if you look at the July 4th Sibley chart, you'll find something very similar. And for this July 2nd chart, progressed Sun gets within 1 degree orb of a square to natal Mars in November of this year. And then it's in effect throughout all of 2026, becoming exact in November. If you use the Sibley chart, progressed Sun got within 1 degree orb of Mars earlier, a few months earlier this year. It's in effect all of next year, but I believe it peaks in March. Either way, regardless of which chart you use, the chances of aggressive actions and war, conflict at home or abroad, began in 2025 and will increase in 2026. And it certainly looks that way with respect to America and Venezuela, right now at least. Okay, a month of wounding. I called October of 2025 a month of wounding for America. And let's see, when the government shutdown began, Chiron was making a strong square to both Mercury and the Moon. So these are the transits to this July 2nd, 1776 chart on October 1st of 2025. Here you see Chiron making that strong square to Mercury in the 10th house, the moon in the 4th house, and both Mercury and the moon, and that suggests wounding to both the economy and the people. Since Mercury rules the 9th and 12th houses, foreign countries like Venezuela and self-undoing could also be involved. Also, the east wing of the people's house was destroyed. That is wounding to the moon and the 4th house. The 4th house is traditionally the home, the moon is the people. The White House is referred to as the people's house. And that also caused blowback for the executive branch and Donald Trump. 10th house, Mercury is in the 10th house, which rules the executive branch. But Mercury also rules the 9th house. And let's see the 12th house here. So these are acts of self-undoing for America. And things in October can also impact foreign countries, 9th house. So a lot of people looking back, I think we can say that October was indeed a month of wounding for America in many ways. Now, if we take a look at Trump, the first item I have here, I titled Trump Wounds Democracy. And I have a tri-wheel where I have the July 2nd, 1776 chart in the center. You could replace that July 4th chart. You're going to get the same thing, because in both charts, Saturn is at 14 degrees Libra, and that's what's important. In the middle, I have Donald Trump's chart, and in the outer ring, I have Donald Trump's progress chart for the start of this year, January 1st, 2025. And here's the important thing. Saturn, representing structure, is at 14 degrees Libra in the USA chart. In Trump's natal chart, Chiron is at 14 degrees Libra, conjunct exactly to the degree, the position of Saturn. In the USA chart, all the July 1776 charts for America will have Saturn at 14 degrees Libra. So, Trump's tendency is to wound the structures of American government, also our foreign relations, since Saturn is in Libra, relations with others, and to wound the structures of our democracy. When he took office this year, progress Mars was at 14 degrees Libra, and so his tendency to wound these structures, it was now taking place on steroids. And that is exactly what we have seen this year. But of course, his followers will simply see this as draining the swamp. So you could take either point of view, but regardless, whether you look at from a liberal or conservative point of view, we can all agree on the facts that a lot of people have been fired from the federal government. A lot of government programs have been cut or curtailed. A lot of restructuring and wounding has indeed taken place. Okay. Now, a lot of what has happened with Trump this year is shown very clearly in the inauguration day chart for 12 noon, January 20th, 2025. And this chart, the sun, representing the president, is in a very strong conjunction with Pluto, conjunct the cusp of the 10th house. And so this will likely, this is why I wrote at the beginning, this will likely be a powerful bellicose presidency that will seek to overpower others. That was my weather forecast. I didn't really know the specifics of what would follow, but in the months that have followed, we have seen Trump maneuver to bring more and more of the government's power under control of himself and the executive branch. The Department of Justice no longer acts independently from Trump. He says, go after this person I'm seeking revenge on, and they go after that person. He has tried to control and coerce the Federal Reserve into doing what he wants, and to a little extent, they have bent to his will somewhat. But for better or worse, he has made the executive branch more powerful than probably any president before him, at least in my lifetime. We can go back earlier and talk about the actions of some other presidents, why they did what they did, but for my lifetime, going back to 1952, he has consolidated so much power in his hands and the executive branch. Aggression at home. This is shown by Mars conjunct the cusp of the fourth house, which represents the home and the homeland. And Mars is in Cancer, which that sign has to do with the home and the homeland. And we've seen aggressive use of the Border Patrol, ICE, the National Guard, and the military against people living in this country, and significant destruction of the people's house. This contributes to that also, in terms of astrological influences that manifest as specific actions. Mars in Cancer, conjunct the cusp of the fourth house, the people's house undergoes significant destruction. Presidential chaos. Uranus in the first house. His first year in office in the second term has been, by all respects, marked by a lot of chaos, a lot of disrupting of existing norms and patterns, such as using the Justice Department as his personal attorney for retribution. And he's flip-flopped continually on his tariff policies. Another type of action you expect when Uranus is involved. So, this weather has manifested in a variety of different ways. It's certainly been a very chaotic year for the American people. And this last slide I think I have on Trump, I just titled it Trump Wins Everything because I had to keep it short. We have a pretty strong T-square involving the Moon, Chiron, and Mercury in this inauguration day chart. This suggests wounding and self-undoing, Chiron in the 12th house. A lot of Trump's actions have wounded America. We've broken our special relationship with Canada. Soybean farmers are going bankrupt. The price of beef, it's sky high. Price of coffee's gone up as a result of his tariffs against Brazil, even though we don't have a coffee industry in this country. We always get our coffee from south of the border. Okay, this configuration has affected the public. That is going to be the Moon, foreign relations, Mercury in the 9th house, finances. Mercury also rules the 2nd house, healthcare, primarily through the actions of RFK Jr., and workers. Those are 6th house concerns. And we've had a lot of people lose their jobs in both the federal government and outside of the federal government. And of course, healthcare costs are increasing quite a bit for everyone in 2025. And for those dependent on Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, they are going, in some instances, to premiums will go up 600% or more. And We can also point out that Mercury is the ruler of Virgo on the cusp of the sixth house. So things impacting Mercury also are impacting finances, healthcare, workers, in addition to foreign nations. And Mercury also, of course, rules commerce. So Trump has pretty much wounded everything. And here's a headline just today, just this morning in the Washington Post. How RFK Jr. upended the public health system. Interviews with almost 100 people reveal how Kennedy, as health secretary, has changed the vaccine and broader public health infrastructure in less than a year. And here's another headline from this morning in the Washington Post. Social Security ends year in turmoil as record backlogs delay services. Customer service has deteriorated by key measures as the agency enacted sweeping cuts in the president's second term, internal data and interviews show. So this is just another way in which the people and the workers who get Social Security of this country are being wounded in this second Trump administration. In many agencies, he has gutted the workforce, and essential work is either being delayed or just not done at all. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about Russia. And the headline that I wrote for this year was Russian Instability. And this is because Russia has a long history of major changes occurring in the years before, during, or after a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And here you see, this is May 24th, 2025. We were getting very, very close to exact conjunction all summer long. And this is the day that Saturn entered Aries. Okay. Now here is just a summary of some of the major events in Russia happening around the time of Saturn-Neptune conjunctions. Going back to 1882, we had the assassination of Tsar Alexander II. That actually happened the year before, the year prior to the conjunction. But you can have that long an orb in time when it comes to these conjunctions. And the conjunctions often bring about changes in direction or philosophy. And Tsar Alexander II was a progressive reformer. But he was succeeded by his son, Tsar Alexander III, who was very far right. And he undid the reforms that his father had done. 1917, we have another conjunction, and we have the Bolshevik Revolution, which puts an end to Tsarist Russia, but unfortunately replaces it with communism. In 1953, we had the death of Stalin, and that brought about a major change in direction for Russia. And there was the dismantling of a lot of those policies of Stalin following his death. Also in 52, which was also a year of a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, that is when Putin was born. And Putin, if his birth date is correct, he was born at the time when Saturn and Neptune were pretty closely conjunct with one another. And in 1989, we had a conjunction of Saturn and Neptune, and we saw Neptune dissolve structure, Saturn is structure. We saw the Berlin Wall, that structure literally dissolve before our eyes. And we also saw several Eastern Bloc countries breaking away from the Soviet Union and replacing communism with democracy. And by 1991, the Soviet Union had collapsed, though I believe Putin dreams of being an old-style Russian Tsar, and he is trying to reconquer those countries and bring them back and resurrect the Soviet Union. And of course, the big question mark is what will happen in 2026. We got somewhat of a preview in 2025 when we had Saturn within 1 degree orb of Neptune pretty much all summer long. And I asked artificial intelligence what the stabilizing influences are there in Russia these days. I asked this last summer, and it said military overextension in Ukraine, economic strain and sanctions, hybrid warfare blowback. It's been crossing uh, the borders of NATO countries with drones and missiles and things, internal dissent and demographic pressure, border tensions and regional friction. So Russia is under pressure these days. And Putin's days could conceivably be numbered. It all depends upon how good his health is, how strong his grip on power is. But there is more and more pressure, I believe, building against him. At some point, the oligarchs or others in government may decide they have had enough and may stage a coup. We don't know. We just have to wait and see. As I say, Russia is still a very closed society, and so it's hard to know what is going on, what is really going on inside the government. Nonetheless, according to this article, the collapse of Russia has already begun. This is an article I saw early last fall or late last summer. This is an article I saw in the Washington Post just this morning, right before I began to make this video. It says, as Russia's war grinds on, its society is fraying. The Kremlin presents the country as strong, united, and on an inevitable path to victory, but as peace negotiations drag on, fatigue and resentment are festering beneath the suppression of dissent. Astrologically, Russia has a tough road ahead of it for the rest of this decade. And also, America has a rough road ahead for much of the rest of this decade. So, rumblings we have seen in 2025 for both America and Russia are likely to worsen over the next few years. That's my weather report. But again, I don't know the specifics of what will happen exactly. Okay, that's it for this presentation. So I've stopped sharing. I'm back. And as you can see, I give a weather report. I can't give specifics on events. Those people, astrologers who make predictions like, Putin's going to die on this day, so-and-so is going to win the election. They are more often wrong than right. Because what actually happens is things do play out in accordance, mostly with the astrological weather. What happens a little differently than what we expect, that's usually because there's some other variables in play that weren't included in the astrological model for those predictions. But as you can see, things have turned out pretty much in the world, in America, with Trump and with Russia, as I expected, based upon that astrological weather. We have more dissension and dissatisfaction in America. We have Trump militarizing our cities, using National Guard and other forces to invade people's homes and terrorize particular segments of our society. We have much of our government and democracy being dismantled, power concentrated in the executive. We also have people staging protests around the world, and we have signs that things and major changes may occur in the near future in Russia. As I say, that society is not as open, so the information we get is more sparse than what we have for America or the rest of the world. But if you watch some of my other videos, you can get an idea of what's ahead next year for 2026, and even what will follow for America and some of the other countries in the years beyond that. Okay, so as I say, keep looking to the stars. Join me for more presentations in the future. But for now, I want to wish everyone a happy new year, and I hope it is a good year. I'm expecting some difficulties ahead, but if enough of us turn within, find our spiritual center, and focus on that daily, then we can create a better outcome than anticipated. So that's what I'm hoping for. Let's all have a happy new year. And for now, I'll just say so long and be well.